So Netflix got themselves a new horror movie, and it's called The Deliverance. Is it worth your time? Are you into exorcism movies? Let's talk about it. So this one changes things up a little bit. So we've got our main character here, Ebony, and she's got 3 kids, and she lives with her mom. And we have quite a different protagonist here for this film than we would usually get, which was actually the highlight of this film for me and might be a low point for some people because they like more traditional protagonists.
Yeah.
I prefer interesting and more unique ones. And with this one, we get her being pretty abusive to her children, and her mom, played by Glenn Close, is definitely the most different I've ever seen her, and is probably the most terrifying thing in this film. But yeah, as I had said, this is an exorcism movie at its core, and this is based on true events. Now, I'm not a believer in this type of stuff, so you can take this opinion here from somebody like that, and she's a little bit more on the potentially believing side, so that's how you'll have to view this through that lens. But overall, this has a lot of good dramatic elements that explores a family that's a lot different than a typical exorcism movie. If you take The Exorcist or The Conjuring or any of the typical classic exorcism movies, the family is always really solid until the exorcism stuff, or like the demonic possession type stuff starts happening. Then the family starts to come undone, as to where this family is already very broken by the time this happens. And that plays into a lot of the drama of the movie, which that's where the film actually succeeds fairly well, is in the drama. They have very good actors in Glenn Close, as well as Caleb McLaughlin from Stranger Things. And I think the performances from everyone are very solid. Unfortunately, this also is a horror film, and all of the horror is terrible cliches from the exorcism subgenre. And therefore, I find this to be a failure, because this was trying to be a horror film with drama, with good drama. But you have to, succeed in both areas, and this film definitely does not do so.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like you kind of said it all perfectly already. The family dynamic is definitely the best part about the film. The relationships between everybody was really compelling, and the acting as well. Everyone's performance was great, but the horror just falls super flat in this. It's very, very cliche, and in a very bad way, and the final act of the film, when everything is supposed to be the scariest and like at its highest point, was boring, and the like special effects and makeup effects were very comical, and I thought they looked really bad, and they totally took me out of the film. Even though I wasn't that invested in the horror aspect already, it was so lame. And yeah, I mean, I don't really have a lot more to say about it, honestly. It's a very disappointing film. I'm somebody who really likes exorcism films for the most part, and I can enjoy them even if they are like very traditional and very like by the book, but I really need the horror to be like at its best in that case. And this ended up, you said it when we were talking about it earlier, it feels very preachy. Like, this is definitely a movie that has kind of an agenda behind it in a way, at least as far as like the religious aspect goes. And typically that does happen sometimes in exorcism films, obviously, but I just didn't appreciate that tone in this film, I guess.
Yeah, it's very heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And when you deal with exorcism films, of course, 9 times out of 10, the church is portrayed as the good guy. That God is going to save the day, that you believe in Jesus, and you use his power and whatever, right? That's like exorcism 101. And so we're used to that, but the film definitely has this allegoric feeling to it, where it talks about like, alcoholism, family abuse, and basically if you don't turn to God, that the demons within will consume you without his power.
Yeah.
That to me, I don't know. I don't like that. That's one of the reasons I did not go to AA when I was trying to quit alcohol, because of the religious aspect of it. I think that you can 100% beat it without, and I am living proof. But anyway, putting all of that aside, it's just a very standard, generic, cliche exorcism film. And, you know, with it being based on a true story, I know this isn't technically possible, because obviously that's like the whole point of the story that makes it interesting for people to even have told this story to begin with. But when it comes to this movie, the things that work are the drama, and the horror doesn't. So for me, you could excise that stuff from the film. That's what needs to be exorcised is the horror
aspect.
Because the drama in this works quite well, and I think you'd have a very good drama here with the, you know, mother and the grandmother and the children and their dynamic. I would have watched that movie. Like,
yeah,
if that,
I would have too.
If we would have never got to the horror and we would have just continued to keep focusing on their relationships and how this continued throughout, I would have been much more vested in that. But, you know, we did get what we got, and unfortunately it ended up being something that was very enjoyable, or unenjoyable. And it's not the worst exorcism film of the year. I still think that's the Russell Crowe movie.
Yeah, that one definitely is.
The Exorcism? Isn't that what it was called?
Yeah, I think so. That one's definitely worse than this. But yeah, there's also some character arc stuff that's set up in the film that does not get resolved in a satisfying way at the end. There's like a major cop-out that I hated.
Yeah.
And it does involve religion, so it was just kind of like very eye-rolly.
Yeah.
And I'm all for like watching people, like priests or whatever, like I like the clash of good versus evil in these movies. Like I do find it exciting, and I think it's like it can feel very powerful, and I'm into that. But I also really appreciate when there's a bit of like humility and like self-reflection on the person that's on the side of the good or whatever. And that's just,
Glenn Close is unrecognizable in this film.
Yeah, her performance is pretty great.
Yeah.
But it's, not a recommendation.
Definitely not. So, yeah, anyway, if you want to watch it, it is currently streaming on Netflix. And at least it tries some new things in the first half with the family dynamic. And that was cool.
Yeah.
The rest ain't.
Yep.
Let us know. Bye.
Bye.